This is my continuing series of Don't Let This Catastrophe Happen to You. In this case, it's don't assume that advanced advertising tactics are what you need. Investors get frustrated when they can't get a consistent source of motivated sellers and abandon their proven methods for bright, shiny objects that may or may not be the best idea. What I see too often is investors bouncing around from BSO to BSO, bright shiny objects, the newest course in town, the absolute can't fail thing, trying to find the perfect place to get deals. What I also see is seasoned investors who have proven prospecting methods run into dry spells where suddenly their proven advertising stops working. These pros then start looking for BSOs. Just like the newbies, the only difference is the cost of the campaigns. What I'm going to do is review what works and why, and the reasons proven prospecting methods can stall or stop. Let's look at the basics to begin with, from start to finish. Investors have a myriad of methods that have worked for many years and continue to do so, including but not limited to print advertising, driving for dollars, social media ads, internet ads, cold calling, door knocking, purchasing leads, and on and on. These sources of leads are then screened down to a few prospects who expressed an interest in the advertising they received. It's emotionally a lot easier if a prospect calls the investor as he believes he's in a position to solve the prospect's problems. I hear it all the time, especially from new investors who say, I am dynamite on the phone, I can close people, but I can't do cold calling. They have to call me. That may be the case, but that's an emotional response, and it needs to be overcome. It is emotionally more difficult for many investors, as I said, to simply cold call prospects and make a presentation. The result is investors spend billions of dollars annually on incoming lead generation, which often produced vastly different results. Let's look at what can go wrong and what may work if done correctly. Motivated sellers are where they are because of choices, sometimes not of their own doing, such as sickness, death, or loss of income. Because all property owners face these unexpected issues of life, motivated sellers will always be a renewable resource. There are many times when it seems no deals are available, there are just too many investors, but the deals are being done. The first thing to look at is the consistency and cyclical nature of advertising. This is what is called a sine wave, and the rhythm of nature moves in the sinusoidal path. So the question is, where did you start your advertising? Did you start it up here, right at the top of the down cycle? Or did you start it down here at the bottom of the cycle? Or are you near the top already? What's important here is that the distance between the peaks or the valleys is what's called a frequency. And is this frequency 1 month, 1 year, or it could be 5 years? What difference does that make? Well, it makes a lot of difference if you're advertising. You can be in a down trough for 1 month, 1 year, or as much as 5 years. Typically that doesn't happen. But combined with this sinusoidal nature of anything, including the emotional rhythms of people, are other overlying forces, such as coronavirus, the economy, and personal things that happen to the people who are in a position to lose their home, the ones who you need to provide a solution for. It can be as simple as, I don't want the house anymore, it's a probate, I don't want to be bothered with it. Whatever it is, for a convenience reason, or because it has to be sold because of a time element, that's what you're there for. So let's look at the expected cost of a number of different advertising programs. These are what professional investors are using to get repetitive leads. Any cost I mention here are subjective and the result of many variables, so assume they are generalizations but reasonably accurate. My intent is for the viewer to better understand what to expect before he gets into a financially bad situation. When I talk about don't let this happen to you, what you're facing as an investor is intense competition. But don't let yourself fall in a trap of spending money before you have made money and you're capable of closing the prospect and selling the property. Experience is the best way to save money and remain in the business. And that's why mentoring and coaching programs are essential to your success. There's a lot of interesting information on YouTube, and if you're fixing refrigerators or tire flats and things like that, can be very valuable. But if you notice, and some of you have watched a lot of videos, you'll see either the same repetitive thing, or certainly some people spring off on their own and talk about things that they've done. A lot of cases those things may never have worked. They're trying to get you to experiment on them. So let's talk about outgoing leads. This is where you stack filters from a data consolidator or you buy a lead list that was put together for you to use for prospecting. What is stacking filters? That means that instead of just calling listed properties, you want to be able to call listed properties that have issues. For example, pre-foreclosure, pre-tax deed sale, divorce, bankruptcy pending, and a list of other things that you can readily find typically in the public record. These data consolidator are data services that can provide you with literally thousands of prospects. A few of the usual prospecting techniques include cold calling, texting, direct mail, door knocking, and it goes on and on. You can actually go to a company like listsource.com and pick your own parameters to get your leads. Now, they've been in the business for a very long time and typically and historically were the provider of good lists. In recent times, what's happened is the data consolidators have pulled the same information that ListSource has at a much more reasonable price. The estimated cost with ListSource can be as little as $1 to up to $12.50 or more if purchased individually, and usually there's a minimum of 100 to 250 leads. First, you must contact these leads and use your sales skills to get a property under contract. The next phase is to find buyers for your deals, which is another discussion. We're not going to get into it here. You've heard me say this before. The single most important thing ultimately for you as a real estate investor is to have a very big and strong and deep buyers list. Now let's talk about incoming leads. These are the emotionally easier leads to take care of. These are the result of advertising where a prospect calls you, writes you, or contacts you in some way. The typical methods used can be banner signs, social media, cold calling, direct flyers, direct mail, flyers, door knocking, SMM, or pay-per-click using Google AdWords to mention a few. There's a growing number of qualified lead suppliers where the companies run their own ad campaigns, pay-per-click, social media ads, and other techniques to find what should be motivated sellers and offer these leads for sale. Seemingly all the work to get the prospect to call is done for you. Depending on the area you live in, these leads could be anywhere from $30 to over $650 each. And if you say to yourself, man, that's really a lot of money, it may not be. As you start to get into lead generation, $650 may look cheap for an area like Long Island. I have to say at this point that a naive general assumption is you should be able to close 1 of every 10 of the leads you purchase. Lead list providers will tell you that. However, it's naive. In what I see, only the most professional closers can close that high a ratio. The keys to success in our business are simply effective and sustainable lead costs, high closing rate or conversion by using scripts and practicing a lot, having a large buyers list. I mentioned the importance of this before and I'm going to stress it again. What's a large buyers list? A good buyers list starts at around 350 buyers. These are people who have actually purchased homes before, not new investors who have swapped cards with you at a REIA meeting. These guys are real. You can find them online. They're cash buyers. Now, all lead sources have the following in common. The cost of leads, which is all the advertising or an ad spend as it's cost in the business, divided by the number of leads generated. An ad spend of, say, $10,000 for 10,000 mailers with a 1% response is 10,000 divided by 1% or 100, which is $100 per lead. Now, if you're saying to yourself, Dave, that's $10,000. I'm starting in the business. I don't want to spend $10,000. I understand that. I'm just trying to show you some numbers. We have students who spend $100,000 a month on mailers, so you understand. But I want to show you some dynamics of numbers here. We also have a student who's probably listening to this that does a standard postcard and mailer combination to about 300 to 400 at a time. And you can do 100 mailers at a time. The key here is who are you mailing to? You're not mailing to every house in the block. You're stacking your leads and you're mailing to people that have an issue. I'm going to tell you this story very quickly. When I started as a stockbroker in the business in 1968, a firm called Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner & Smith, which is now Merrill Lynch. I came back to the office after training. They threw a white pages on my desk and said, there's all the leads you'll ever need. The idea was cold call them. What they found out very quickly is the guys didn't want to cold call. They wanted to cold call with a reason. So the firm set up, mail all you want. And we literally turned into a post office, mailing tons and tons of letters that are obviously approved by the firm to everybody in the white pages. And I decided I didn't want to wait for people to mail and then have to follow up and so on. So I used the same script that I used before, and that was, hi, my name's Dave Dinkle. I sent you a letter on Union Carbide. If you'll notice, it's a 12% yield and selling at 3 times earnings, which it was at the time, believe it or not. And half the time they would say to me, I got it, and half the time they'd say I didn't get it. So I would go into the rest of my script. But what I found out was I'm tired of doing that. What I'm going to do is just call them and say, hi, my name's Dave Dinkle with Merrill Lynch. Did you get the letter I sent you on Union Carbide? Half of them said yes, half of them said no. Half of them were lying, the other half probably didn't know any better. The point was this, it opened the door for me. So when you have a 1% response, it means you have a 99% non-response. What's wrong with going after the other 99% of the people that didn't call you back, email you back, answer your whatever you sent them? That's up to you, but that's the most effective lead cost there is. Now remember, these are what should be motivated sellers because you've pre-sorted them out through stacked filters. I'm going to assume that you can close 1 out of 20 of these leads. That's optimistic to begin with. What you need to close is 1 in 20 divided into 100 is 5 leads. And in this case, your lead cost would be $10,000 divided by 5 is $2,000 each. Very simply. If you're saying to yourself, oh my God, $2,000 for a lead, if it's a closed sale, we're going to look at what's your profit on it. There are a lot of guys in the business who assign these contracts for $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, and in fact, they're not making any money. They don't realize it until the end of the year or when they realize they don't have any money in their checking account anymore. What's the cost of closed sales? Now remember, this is the income per closed sale or gross profit divided by your advertising cost plus general and administrative expenses. What are G&A expenses? Salaries, rent, all those things that you have when you're a business entity. If you say to me, Dave, I work out of my bedroom closet, that's fine. But somewhere along the line, you better take out money called a salary or bonus or call it whatever you want. And those have to be figured into your cost of closed sales. Now further assume that you close these leads with a profit of $5,000 per deal, which is small. Okay, I say it's small because you can't make a living doing that. But I hear all the time, I just want to make money, I'll take whatever I can get. And typically the person you're selling it to is an experienced professional wholesaler, and he's going to say, I really didn't want to pay $5,000 over what you paid. I'll make it up on the next one. And he goes out and resells it for $35,000 or $40,000 profit. But that's because you don't have a big enough buyer's list. So I said here add 20% for G&A expenses, which comes off of your profit. So 5,000 less 1,000 times 5 sales divided by 5 closed sales is a $4,000 profit per closed sale. Is that good or bad? Well, what that comes out to be is on the 5 sales, the money you spent on the mailing in this case, your net profit's about $20,000. This indicates your return on investment, or ROI, is $20,000 from your gross profit, no G&A expenses included, minus the $10,000 you invested, and divided by the $10,000 you invested originally. So it's 10 divided by 10 is 100%. A good return on your investment if it was consistent. But what happens when you get 20 instead of 100 responses and no closed sales? Your choices are to stop or keep going. And it can be a critical choice because if your cash flow is 0 and your funds are limited, you have no choices except to stop. So one way to overcome this is if you have capital put aside for advertising, spend it wisely and slowly. Well, what suddenly changed? Suddenly you're getting leads and then suddenly you aren't getting leads. There's no way to tell specifically. Obviously with the pandemic, things are happening. But after the pandemic, other things are going to happen. And your advertising is going to work amazingly well. Why? Because there's many more motivated sellers. One question I ask investors or students about their ad campaigns is how long did you do the ad campaign? Oftentimes I get a response, well, I tried it for a day or a week or maybe 2 weeks, but you need to make a commitment to it. Plan on at least 3 months for any campaign before you stop or decide to tweak it. What do I mean by tweaking it? That means to change part of your advertising, your introductory sentence, words in it, adding keywords, whatever it happens to be. But the one thing to remember is tweak one item in the ad at a time. Don't change the whole ad or you're going to be right back where you started from, not knowing what the issue was, if there was one. So let's talk about the fastest way to get qualified leads in your first day. And I see guys advertising online all the time. I put you in #1 Google position. Everybody that goes and Googles these keywords, buy my house, fast cash, so on and so forth, is going to see you. It's true. By far the most popular and fastest results can be had by using Google AdWords, instant traffic to your website. The process is simple and it's as follows. You set up a squeeze page online and open an AdWords account with Google. A squeeze page is simply a lead capture page that guides the viewer into, presumably, filling out an application and telling you his name, address, phone number, and his problem. Because you're paying for position on the top of the page, suspects will see your ad on Google when they Google the keywords that I mentioned before. Cash for my home, buy my house fast, probate problems and issues, solve my pre-foreclosure, upcoming tax deed sales, so on and so forth. The more popular the keywords, such as buy my house cash, the more competition there is, and the more you're going to pay for that click-through to your squeeze page. Now, if your ad text is good enough on the squeeze page, let's assume 100 people click through to your website, again, or the squeeze page, 100 clicks. What hopefully happens next is the viewer fills out an application for you to call him. That's the whole point of paying the money, to get those 100 people to come to your website to fill out the application form. Typically, of the 100 who click through, you can assume that one will fill out your information form, and you can convert, again, maybe 1 in 10 to a closed deal. That means you'll need 1,000 clicks to get 10 applicants to close one deal. Now, I'm sure there's listeners out there who are saying to themselves, he has no idea what he's talking about. I only need 300 clicks to get a deal. Or maybe they're saying to themselves, I have to pay for 2,000 clicks to get one. That is notable, and it's notable because if you're paying for 2,000 clicks, you're wasting an awful lot of money because your conversion, your closing, is not correct. I'll talk about that coming up in a minute. Again, I've mentioned this mysterious number of 1 in 10, which I told you was mystical more than anything else, unless you had a lot of experience in sales. So what was your cost per deal before the G&A expenses for AdWords on Google? Now let's assume your cost per click was only $25 each. So your cost for one closed deal would be, let's say, 500 clicks, not 1,000. 500 times $25 a click, it's $12,500 for one closed deal. If your gross profit on the deal was $10,000, you've lost money. A lot of people lose money on Google AdWords because of the conversion rate. But what if your lead cost had been $50 each, which is not uncommon, especially in high competitive areas for competitive keywords? It would mean that you had a $25,000 closed deal cost. The actual industry averages of cost per closed deal, without general and administrative expenses added in, range between $4,000 and $8,500. So why is that less than $12,500? Simply because these guys have been doing it for a while. They know how to geo-target specific, almost streets, so they get fewer clicks, but they're higher quality clicks, I'm going to say. Investors who can generate a lead flow from free or low-cost lead sources, as well as directly contacting these leads, can keep your lead costs below $100 per lead. Typically what happens is an investor gets very excited when he starts making money, and his goal is to start scaling. If he does $10,000 a month, not bad. Does $20,000 and $30,000 a month, now he's talking about serious bucks. So what he does is he figures, I can do this a lot better. I can go hire VAs and do some things to do the work for me. What happens when an investor begins to scale his operation with virtual assistants doing the cold calling for him is where the conversion rate drops dramatically. The natural response is to do more lead generation without addressing the next real problem of conversion. Pro investors run ads on Facebook and Craigslist for closers who will be supplied with hot leads, income potential $250,000 a year. These investors find tired salesmen that can do very well, especially with a base commission, a bonus for profit size, and scripts to lead them through to the close and to get the sale. So cold calling has become an industry standard because phone banks of callers can be set up easily with plenty of prospects and little out-of-money costs. I saw something today where a person who had been doing driving for dollars for himself decided to scale up, and he went from himself to 8 drivers. How's that going to work for him? I can tell you he will get deals. It depends on what the drivers are doing. If they're only locating vacant properties, he can get those online through any of the data consolidator services for very little money. If he's looking for other types of properties specifically for driving for dollars that can't be seen as vacant properties, Hopefully he'll make larger profits on those. So the number of connected calls that lead to a data collection form using VA cold callers can be anywhere from 1 in 200, which is extraordinarily good, to as high as 1 in 3,000 plus. For investors who just do not want to make cold calls and they're going to do it this way, I suggest what you do is find VAs who speak not English, they speak American, and bilingual if you're going to work in a bilingual market. Why do I say that? Because people are oftentimes irritated by people who speak English from foreign countries, and you don't get as much impact. One of the things I wish investors would do who hire VAs is to actually listen to their employees who are making the calls. I hate to say it's pitiful, but it is in way too many cases. Now, why do they accept that? Because their thought process is the investor who hires the VA is it only costs me $3 an hour, $4 an hour, and they can make 100 dials an hour, whatever the numbers are. The bottom line is he feels, or she feels, that they will get some kind of deal out of it, and there's almost no question that it's possible. And as those VAs get more proficient with the scripts, if they're using them, it will work. It's just a matter of will you run out of money before you get your first deal. One of the worst things you can do is hire a VA who has experience and he does his own thing. Just goes off on tangents. I've heard that also too many times because they don't know all of the answers. They need to stay on script to keep control of whoever the prospect the cold call is going to. Now, I want to assume something, and this is probably pretty accurate. Any lead source brings in motivated and unmotivated sellers, and even a few in between who just aren't motivated yet. But equally, no matter what your list is, because you just can't tell ahead of time. If you pull a list with 5 variables or filters, there's no reason to believe that the next list that has 5 different filters is going to have any better response. List B, is it twice the response because they're twice as motivated? You can do that for yourself by simply picking sale dates, whether they be pre-foreclosure sale dates or tax deed sale dates. You have a time element. Or if you're just doing pre-foreclosure in general with no sale date, they're late on their credit card payments and so on, they're going to be pretty much across the spectrum. Why am I saying that? This means there's always some leads that are bogus, simply curiosity seekers. They're not really interested in selling at any time. They're just testing the market, as they say, or they must sell soon. That's a motivated seller. All the other ones are looky-loos. The key to dealing with these people is now in your hands, in your presentation, and the conversion into closed sales, if they're motivated. Now, what if they're motivated in 2 or 3 weeks? Well, you've heard me say this if you watched any of my videos. The money's in the follow-up. So if you're starting out and you hate making calls and it looks like a 800-pound gorilla across the table from you when you go to pick up your phone, you say to yourself, I'll call and I'll do it because Dave said it would work, but I'm not going back to that guy or gal. They're just nasty. That's where the money is in the follow-up. Most of the national telemarketers do not do follow-up. They're a one-shot deal. So their cost per lead is much higher than an individual who has the time, or takes the time, I should say, to follow up. When you start out with the process in mind of contacting the seller and making a presentation, you're working backwards. Let me repeat that. When you start out with the process in mind of contacting the seller and making a presentation, you're actually working backwards. Where you need to be is to develop scripts for each lead source and practice each one so they sound as natural as possible. A number of times in many of my videos I've mentioned a person who does a lot of closings himself. Doesn't actually go to the closing, he just gets them under contract, lists them, sells them, so on and so forth. Every day when he goes to work to start himself doing his own cold calling, he practices the same scripts, the same words he's used for years. Why? Because it makes him money doing it. Too often times when students or new investors start out, they get a script, they're kind of excited about it. They get into the script and they just go off the rails, as I call it. They don't stick to the script. The most important part of using a script is sticking to it. This is what will make your conversions and your profits soar. Stick to the script, follow up, build your buyers list. This allows your cost of advertising to remain pretty much constant, while your net profits will rise exponentially. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? But what I see in new investors, they're jumping into using VAs for their cold calling and even lead follow-up in their pursuit of a life on the beach. Good idea, good goal, life on the beach. Rental incomes, checks come in all the time. Nice, but that works until your system collapses. Rental properties, the people have management systems in place. But with us as investors, you have a lot of moving parts, and as you get more and more income oriented only, you have systems that can fail, people that can fail. You have leakage in profits and everything else. And it's ironic where I see boyfriend, girlfriend, spouses, couples, singles making as much money as people doing 100 deals a year. And they're only doing 15 or 20 or 30. Why? Because they make larger profits. They have the ability to work the profit stream. So in summary, don't give up on your advertising but suddenly stops working for no known reason. When you tweak your ads, only change one item, a test item, at a time to see what may be causing the problem. This is especially true in capture pages, squeeze pages, where you see that you're not getting enough click-throughs. You're not getting their attention. You're not providing what they want to see or hear. Plan on a 3-month commitment to any ad campaign, but know ahead what your cost will be and cut your lead expectations in half when you plan to see if the campaign will be profitable. Run your numbers. Engineer backwards. Understand that in the final analysis, your conversion rate and ability to get price reductions before closing are where the real profits come from. Make money first while you perfect your closing rate before you spend big bucks on ads that you hope will work for you, or you spend big bucks on bright shiny objects that are extremely small niches that once everybody finds out about them, they're no longer viable prospecting methods. So if you can afford it, don't put all your advertising in one format. Have at least 2 different sources going all the time. Again, I'm Dave Dinkle. I wish you limitless success in all that you do.